I'm writing this letter in the fall of 1982 from a small farmhouse tucked into the wooded hills of upstate New York. Through the eaves like a ghost, and the silence between the trees feels heavier with each passing season. The porch boards creak beneath my steps, the chimney coughs smoke in bursts, and the old oak beside the barn still bears the scars of storms that came long before you were born. I've lived out most of my days here, in quiet, in work, in reflection. I never thought I would write this letter. I never thought I'd have the courage. But time, like the frost creeping in before winter, makes liars of all our promises, including the promise I made to myself and to your mother to take this secret to my grave. You don't know me, not really. And when you finish reading this, maybe you'll wish you never had. But that doesn't matter anymore, because the truth, as painful and complicated as it may be, belongs to you now. You have the right to know who you are and where you come from. Your father, the man who raised you, loved you deeply. He gave you a name, a home, a life, and he never knew about me. He died never knowing, and that was by choice, mine and hers. But it was a silence that cost more than we ever admitted. And now, before I'm gone, I need you to hear what she could never bring herself to say. Because you carry more than just his blood, you carry mine too. The story begins in 1944, in a country torn apart by fear, by war, by sacrifice. I was a young soldier in the US Army, stationed for a time at a military hospital in Pennsylvania, recovering from a wound sustained in France. Your mother, Mary, was a Red Cross nurse, not much older than I was, full of grit and grace, with eyes that somehow still held light in a world gone dark. We met in the hallways between operating tables and cots, while men cried out in pain and others never cried again. We fell in love in stolen moments, behind supply tents, in the hush of late-night shifts, in scribbled notes passed under trays of food. And one night, when the shelling felt like it might tear the sky open, she said to me, "If we make it out of this, I want a life with you." I believed her. I still do. But war doesn't care about promises. I was reassigned, sent back overseas. We wrote for months, or at least I did, letter after letter. I poured everything I had into those envelopes, stories of the front, sketches of a home we could build, a ring I never got to give her. But the silence that came in return was colder than any trench. I didn't know then that she'd been relocated suddenly, her mail lost in the shuffle of orders and bombings. I didn't know she was pregnant. And when my final letter, the one where I asked her to marry me, came back marked "Recipient Unknown," I stared at it for hours, feeling like I had died too. That silence lasted almost 3 years, and by the time I saw her again, everything had changed. If this story is touching something inside you, the way it haunted me for decades, please consider subscribing and sharing it. These are the stories that remind us we're more connected than we know. And now, because what comes next will change everything. I first met Mary in the fall of 1944 in a field hospital near a small rural town in Pennsylvania, one of the many hastily erected tents and wooden barracks where American wounded arrived from overseas, wounded in open fields, by roadside bomb, by shrapnel, by the collapse of trenches or the furious crash of artillery, and where Mary, a Red Cross nurse, volunteered her nights without complaint. Her hands stained with antiseptic and sorrow, her voice gentle in hallways lit by swinging lamps as she stitched torn flesh and washed wounds, whispered comfort where no one asked, prayers where no chapel existed. I was a young private in the US Army, recovering from injuries sustained in France, a shell fragment in my leg, a shoulder bruise, and more inside than any doctor could stitch. We fell in love in the pause between gunfire, in the lull after ambulances had emptied and before new ones came. In the stench of disinfectant, in the rustle of cotton bandages, I heard her say to me, "If we survive this, I want a life with you." Her eyes were fierce in that moment, eyes that had seen too much but still could dream of laughter, of ordinary days, of quiet mornings. During those months, while war thundered in Europe, I wrote to her as often as I could. Every week, when I was not on duty or moving with my unit, I found paper, scraps sometimes full sheets mailed from base supply, and I poured my days onto those pages. The smell of wet earth in Normandy after rain, the taste of coffee shared with fellow soldiers under canvas, the fear when the sky lit up with tracer fire, the beauty of sunset over bomb-scarred hills, and always Mary, her hair, her hands, the steady kindness in her voice, what home might mean. I sent sketches, wildflowers I saw growing through rubble, a ribbon torn from a glove, pressed leaves from trees standing even after bombs fell. I believed that love could bridge the ocean, the chaos, the separation. I believed we would have a house on some piece of land, smoke rising from a chimney, children laughing, mornings where nothing more deadly than the cold outside woke us. But Mary never replied. Weeks bled into months. I learned too late that her unit had been relocated suddenly under threat of enemy bombing. Her town near the shore had suffered from air raids. Her mail route was disrupted. Some letters I later heard were lost. Some destroyed in fires. Some returned to me marked addressee unknown. Adieu, one letter, with a ring I had purchased quietly, knowing the war made it difficult to plan, asking her to marry me, came back with a stain I could not clean, with a corner curled by rain, a stamp faded. I held it as though holding her hand. I pressed it against my heart and cried once in the dark, thinking that perhaps the silence meant she believed I was dead or could no longer wait. In the tent hospitals, I saw men worse off than I, crying for mothers, for home, for life. I smelled blood and ammonia and soil, heard the groans of the injured, the screams of bombs overhead, the whine of aircraft engines slicing the sky, the distant rumble of thunder or artillery that felt like the sky itself was being torn. Nights were worst. I lay awake, shivering in cramped bunks, listening to rain seep through canvas and tarp, listening to the soft sobs of men whose letters had not arrived, the moans of wounded, the drip of water leaking onto blankets, wondering if Mary ever thought of me, wondering if she was alive. I wrote more during those nights, writing not only to her but for her, writing for the possibility that someday she would read, "I miss your hands, I miss your laughter. I miss the warmth of morning. I keep a scrap of your ribbon in my pocket. I keep hope in my heart." Rumors reached me. Her hospital was bombed. She was evacuated to safer ground inland. The postal service collapsed in war zones. Perhaps she believed I was dead. I heard stories from other soldiers who tried to write, whose letters were returned, whose loved ones had vanished, whose hope turned brittle. But none of these rumors came from her. None of the replies came. And still I believed, because belief was easier than despair, because hope was my only anchor in that sea of fear. I believed that one day, one letter, perhaps one restored address, perhaps one brave courier, would bring her words to me. I believed that she still waited, that she still wanted a life with me, once the guns fell silent. Then came the day I sent the last letter I dared, the proposal, the promise, the dream. I sealed it, placed the ring inside, addressed it to the place I believed she still lived, days when the sky was heavy with smoke, but I knew I must try. And then, days later, that envelope came back to me, stamped, "Recipient unknown." That phrase felt like a verdict. I stared at it under moonlight, in a barracks that smelled of sweat and gun oil, and I felt every part of me crack. I stood there, clutching that letter, listening to wind outside, shaking the tents, the stars overhead oblivious, and I told myself, this is how love ends in war, not with a bullet, but with silence. Years afterwards, as I recovered, as I walked through destroyed French villages, as I boarded ships back to America, as I tried to forget, I held that silence too. I carried memories of Mary, of promises made under flame and shadow, of what could have been. But even though I rebuilt a life with different hands, built something weaker but still mine, a small house, friendships, work, Mary's face haunted me. The scent of antiseptic, the taste of rain, the sound of her voice in a made-up sentence when the wind echoed through trees. These things kept part of me alive, part shaped by love in those impossible moments. It is that part, fragile yet persistent, that I now bring to you. By 1947, the guns had fallen quiet, yet peace carried its own echo of war, a hollow promise in broken towns and shattered skylines, in the empty shells, in the faces of returning soldiers, forever different even when home once more. I came back to a small community in rural Pennsylvania, winding roads and old maple trees, lawns leaning with age, fields stitched together again with fresh soil, and I found work as a carpenter, repairing porches, door frames, wooden floors, hearing the rasp of saw blades, smelling fresh sawdust and pine sap in the mornings, watching sunlight pour in through windows I helped install, and each drove felt like I was trying to hold together pieces of a world that had tore itself apart. I lived quietly, woke early with the roosters, drank coffee dark as worry, and kept my wounds, both the ones that could be seen and those buried deep, close to my chest. I avoided mirrors because mirrors reminded me of a younger version of myself, mud-splattered, blood-washed, hopeful in ways I no longer allowed myself to be. And every evening, as I sat by the fireplace, listening to the whistle of freight trains rolling east, I thought of Mary, her hands, the sound of her voice, her laughter in the moment before a shell hit, the scent of freshly laundered sheets she would hang on a line in the hospital yard, drying under a sun that felt like it might burn everything away. Then one late summer afternoon, when the heat was soft and golden, when crickets chirped in fields and the smell of hay drifted through open windows, I went into town for supplies, nails, wood, varnish, walked past the hardware store, past the soda fountain with its cracked tiles, past children chasing one another under shade trees, past women peering into windows of shops, past soda jerks smelling shyly, waiting tables, all doing their best to pretend that peace meant everything was safe again. I wasn't expecting anything more than that. A loaf of bread, cans of paint, another night of easy breathing without fear. But then, amid the rows of market stalls, apples, peaches, fresh corn, I saw her, Mary, standing beside a stand of daisies, her hair pinned back, some grey at her temples now, but her face still the same, with a line of strength she had never shown before. And in her arms, a little boy, sunbonnet shading his eyes, fingers curled around a toy worn at the edges. My heart stopped and then flooded. I stepped forward. She saw me. Her eyes widened, a tremble in her lips. She set the boy down gently, asked him to stay by the stand, then pulled me behind an alleyway between two red brick buildings where vines climbed over broken mortar and shadow cooled the heat of the summer. She wept, and I heard every one of her sobs, each one a confession. She told me that she had tried to write, to locate me, to send word, to find out whether I had died, whether I had made it back. Said her hospital unit was moved in the middle of the night, that her home address was lost in bombings, that people she trusted had vanished. She said she thought I was dead long ago. She told me she had married, someone who sheltered her, someone kind, someone steady, and that when she felt you stir in her womb, you grew inside her when the world around her was ragged and bleeding, and she knew she could protect you, could build a life around you even if that life had secrets. You, the boy she held in arms, had grown under that roof, with a father who believed you were his own, who taught you to throw a ball, who sat by your bed when you had fever, who cheered at your school plays, who patched your jeans and kissed scraped knees, who believed in you and loved you as his son. Mary asked, not boldly, but in a voice cracked with longing and fear, that I let things stay as they were, that I not disrupt your world, not call into question the man who raised you, because he loved you, cared for you, built for you what he could. She said that you deserved that, and that she needed me to walk away. Not because she didn't love me, but because she was afraid that truth might shatter more than suffering silence did. As I listened, I felt bitter hope and overwhelming sorrow intertwined. Hope that she had lived, that she had carried our child, that you existed. Sorrow that I missed so much, so many first steps, so many nights, birthdays, words unspoken. I saw you standing there, hands in pockets, looking at apples, at the brim of your hat, your cheeks flushed from the afternoon sun, the slightest trace of a smile when a friend passed you. And I felt I was both proud and broken. Proud that you were strong, that you were becoming a good man. Broken that I had never spoken your name in your ear, never held your hand in the dark, never told you I lie. Ovidiu, Mary's eyes held regrets and love both. Regrets for what she could never give, love for what she did, love for you, love for those days when we believed war would end soon, when we believed love would survive. She begged me to understand, to keep silence, to let the world believe you were her husbands, that the man you called Dad was everything to you, because he was, in ways biology cannot measure. She asked me to step back so your peace would not be torn, your heart not burdened with the weight of truth you did not ask for, with questions you might never want to ask. I stood there in that alleyway, heart pounding, the odor of summer grass, the warmth of sunlight on red brick, sawdust in my pockets from the workshop, every sense alive, every memory alive. And I had to choose, claim you as mine and risk destroying what Mary built, risk your trust, risk your home, or stay silent, protect you from that tumult, let what had been done stand, let you love the man who raised you without questioning his love or mine. And in that moment I felt the world tilt. I saw your future, and I saw that stepping into it might cast shadows where there had been none, that love sometimes demands letting go more than it demands speaking. So I let it be. I pulled back. I watched you with longing in my eyes, but I obeyed Mary's plea. I walked away. I left you her son to him, acknowledging in silence that though I was your father biologically, the love of the man who raised you was no less a father's love, and I wanted you to have that love as undisturbed as possible. And though I left, I carried you with me always, in the echo of market laughter, in the hush of twilight, in the slow creak of floorboards in my house, in every hammer struck at dawn, in every nail I set. You were there, part and pain and hope. I carried your photograph in my jacket pocket for years, long after war paint and bloodshed had faded into memory, because in that fragile snapshot of you as a baby, cradled in Mary's arms, I saw both what was lost and what might have been. I saw cheeks round with promise, eyes closed in sleep, a tiny hand curled like a leaf, and in that moment, nights in Normandy, the smell of burning oil, the pain in my leg, the screams of distant bombs, all felt distant, because nothing in that photograph was broken. And yet, the weight of what was hidden pressed on me, like a stone lodged in my heart, a stone I had carried quietly every day, because the truth I longed to speak would rip open. It might unmake the fragile peace that Mary had built around you, the stability of home, the kindness, the love that you believed in. After our unexpected reunion, I found myself wandering through the workshop late at night, under the dim light of a single bulb, sawdust floating in the halo, the scent of pine lingering, the hammer's echo met only by the hammer in my chest that struck every time I thought of you, of Mary, of your father, good, decent, unaware. And I held that old ring in my hand, the one I bought to propose, I tucked away thinking I might never have the chance, thinking perhaps it was too late, and staring at that tarnished metal, I felt an unbearable tension to claim you, to speak the truth, to step into your life and name myself your father, knowing the cost. Or to step back, to guard your world, to protect your belief, to stay silent, even though each day of silence felt like betrayal. To you, to Mary, to the love that started in that broken hospital, under lamps that flickered, under skies that drowned in smoke and regret. I thought about your father, the one who raised you, as I studied the grooves of his footprints in memory, how he taught you to ride a bicycle, How the wood floor creaked when he carried you across it at night, how he patched your shoes, how he sang lullabies though his voice trembled with fatigue, how he stood proud at your school plays. I thought how much of parenthood is action, not biology, how much of love is sacrifice. And I wondered if claiming you would mean erasing him, not because he didn't merit being recognized as your father, but because the revelation might cast shadows where there had been light, upset foundations built with years of love, make you question the man you call Dad. The knowledge of truth is powerful and dangerous. Mary, with her voice thick with pleading, told me I should leave you be, that the man who raised you believed in you, nurtured you, loved you honestly. She said he gave you the home she feared I could not, after all I had lost, all I had seen, all I had become. She begged me, at times in silence, at times with tears, to spare you the confusion, the possible rejection, the awkwardness, the burden of a truth you did not ask for. And I trembled at the thought that I might destroy the peace you had, the respect you held for him, the normality of your life. Yet inside me I felt the pull of something older, deeper, my blood, my love for you, my ownership of what fate and war had hidden, for you, for Mary, for myself. It was not just longing, it was a grief. This grief of absence, of missed birthdays, missed first words, missed moments I would carry in dreams. Each time you would speak of my father, each time you sat on your porch under that summer sky, each time I heard someone praise the kindness of your dad, I felt both joy and loss. Joy, because you have someone who loved you. Loss, because I was not him. Loss, because I did not deserve to be him, though biologically I was. I weighed the cost, your sense of identity. Would it be fractured? The possibility of anger, would you despise me for hiding? The possibility of love changing in strange, terrible ways. I weighed Mary's pain, how deeply she would suffer, how cold the world can be toward mothers who carry secrets, how heavy regret becomes. I weighed the dignity of your father, how he would feel, how his trust shattered not by malice but by truth. And I weighed myself, how I would carry the shame, how I would watch you from afar if I had to, how I would bear silence so you might live more simply. In the quiet of my workshop, the wood grains under my fingers, the smell of varnish, the low hum of crickets outside, I made my choice. I chose silence, I chose protection. I chose that you would know peace in your home, that the man you called father would not be cast in shadows, that you would not walk through life wondering whether love you received was less because it lacked the secret. I stepped back. I let the ring collect dust. I hid the letters. I watched you from a distance, proud of your achievements, your graduation, your work, your gentleness. Proud you became a man of honor, even though I was not there to shape those moments. But the choice tore me inside. It fractured me into two halves, one that wanted to break open the door and say, "I am your father," with trembling voice. The other that slept under guilt, under memories of Mary's tears, under nights when silence felt more painful than the wounds I carried. In choosing you, in protecting you, I lost parts of myself, my chance to watch you grow, to hear your laughter, to whisper in your ear. And in that loss, I learned that silence is not peace. It is a wound that stays alive inside the heart. Even now, decades later, I carry both halves, the one filled with longing and regret, and the one filled with love and respect for what you had. Because you have the right to know. Not so that you blame or resent or feel divided, but so that you can understand, so that the truth is not a ghost in your life, but a part of it. So you can claim all of yourself, not just the parts you were given. For 40 years, I carried with me a box, nothing fancy, made of cedar wood, tucked beneath the floorboards of my workshop, hidden from daylight, from curious eyes, from memory itself, but held as holy. In that box lay letters written in wartime, photographs yellowed with age, a medal whose ribbon frayed at the edges, a ring I'd bought but never given, and a brooch Mary pinned to my coat the last time I saw her. Small tokens, I thought, of a life I could never fully claim, but symbols nonetheless of truth that refused to die. Each night, after the farrier's wood had cooled in the fireplace, after the crickets had ceased their singing, I would open that box, run my fingers over the edges of the letters, smell the old paper, the faint odor of smoke in the photographs, the metal of the medal, the gold of the brooch, and I would feel you as though you were there, though unseen. I would hope that somehow, in the retracing of my hands, you might one day understand. The medal is simple. A small bronze disc awarded quietly for an act in the trenches, for helping wounded comrades under fire when bullets fell like hail and screams tore the air. Its inscription reads, "For valor beyond fear," and though tarnished, the words remain legible, slightly dulled by oxidation, by neglect, by the years I avoided wearing it, because to wear it would have been to admit I survived, to admit I lived in memory of things too heavy to speak aloud, to admit that I had someone I loved, and someone who bore my child. Then there is the ring, plain, unadorned, made of silver, with a small engraving inside the band. Mary, forever. Bought that ring in the base exchange in France, from a jeweler whose hands shook as bombs fell overhead, when for a moment the world felt fragile and yet hopeful. I kept the ring in a small wooden box, carved with initials I thought you might one day trace with your fingers, a box I hid beneath floorboards, beneath wood and dust, beneath years of silence, because I feared what might happen if you had it, that you would look at it and wonder what I wanted, what I had demanded, what I had denied you for all those years. The brooch, Mary's brooch, is delicate, gold-plated petals forming a flower, a small emerald green stone in the center, dull now but once brilliant under lamplight. She pinned it to my coat on the last cold morning before I left, hands trembling, voice low. She said, "Carry this close to your heart so you don't forget me." And I did carry it, through foxholes, through long nights, through cold winters and hot summers, slipping it into an inside pocket, touching it when I felt the ache of your absence, when I examined strangers' children and wondered if their laughter was like yours, if their eyes held the same light I had imagined in your photographs. There are a few. One of Mary holding you as a baby, bundled in a blanket, hat pulled low over your forehead, cheeks rosy in newborn sleep. One of Mary alone, standing outside the field hospital, dirt on her shoes, face drawn but resolute. One of me in uniform, wounded, bandaged, looking away because I couldn't bear to meet a camera's eye, afraid that if I did, I'd be exposing the longing in mine. The edges of those photos are bent, the light in some spots washed out, but the faces are clear. Mary's courage, your smallness, my regret. These are the things I hid, because silence, I thought, would protect you. Because I believed that shielding you from the truth would spare you confusion, conflict, hurt, and I was wrong, because hiding a truth is not mercy, it's erasure of part of you. Because every year I hid these objects, I also hid myself from you, hid your father from knowing, hid your mother from the shame she never felt, hid the possibility that you should have more than one story, more than one name, more than one love. Now, I unfold all of this for you. Inside this envelope, enclosed safely, you will find copies of the letters I wrote during the war. Many never reached your mother. Some were returned to me, stained and torn. You will find the photograph Mary gave me of you as a newborn. You will find the brooch she pinned, the ring I never placed on her finger, the medal I never wore, and in a small sealed note, her handwriting inside, where she confessed what she could not speak aloud, that she loved me, that she regretted what war had stolen from us, and that she protected you because she believed a home built with truth might collapse unless the ground beneath it was firm. These things are yours, not because I ask you to call me father, though that truth is mine to claim, but because you deserve to hold in your hands what was real. You deserve to know that though biology made me your father, love made the man you called Dad worthy, And you deserve to understand that you are made of more than the narratives you grew up with. You deserve to have the full map of your past, not only the roads others walked, but the ones I could not take, the ones Mary did, the ones I chose or was silenced into. Holding these tokens won't erase the years of distance, the ache, the quiet nights when I dreamt of your laughter, your small hands, your growing up. But maybe they will bring you peace. Maybe they will let you see that love, even when interrupted by war, by fear, by silence, persists. Maybe they will help you stitch together the parts of your life that felt missing, the questions you never asked, the claims you never made, the name you never heard. And maybe, just maybe, knowing will be enough. And so, I give them to you now. Trembling hands, hopeful heart, because what was hidden is yours to hold, because truth, though late, is still a gift. Because at long last, I want you to have what has always been yours. When you read this letter, I may already be gone from this world. My breath faded into quiet, but know that's okay. I don't write this to upend your life or to sow confusion. I write it to plant a seed of truth, because a life built on half-truths is a house on quicksand. I have lived long enough in shadows, in the silence between things, and I've come to understand that truth, even when delayed, is better than comfort built on lies. So I leave this letter as my final confession, my last gift, hoping it gives you more than pain. Hoping it gives you clarity, dignity, and the chance to shape your story whole. I carry no expectation, no demand for forgiveness, no request for recognition. I ask only this, that you know I loved you. That though I stood apart, untold, unseen, I carried your image in every sunrise, in every sound of laughter from a neighbor's child, in every letter I never sent, in every tear I swallowed. I loved you in absences, in long nights, in the dreams I dared only in the dark. Loving you has been a quieter battle than war, but it has cost me just as much. I write to you now with hands that tremble, with a heart that has borne decades of silence, but with a soul finally eased by the knowledge that truth will rest in your hands, not mine alone. Your life has been shaped by a man who raised you, not by blood, but by presence, by sacrifice, by caring, by giving you your childhood, your name, your sense of belonging. Honoring him is not diminished by knowing my part. If anything, his love becomes more remarkable in light of the secret he never needed to know, but whose absence was not his failing. He is, in his actions, in his constancy, your father. That man deserves your gratitude, your respect, your love. And I want you to keep that, undiminished. I want you to see that fathers are not only those who share blood, but those who share home, work, tenderness, responsibility. The objects I have entrusted to you, the old letters, the photographs, the medal, the ring, the brooch, are not mere relics. They are pieces of a map you never had, coordinates of origin, proof that though parts of your history were hidden, they were never erased. Hold them if you wish. Let them answer questions you have or open new ones. Let them be stones in the foundation of your identity. Feel the weight of the medal, the texture of the old paper, the way a photograph catches the light. These are parts of what shaped you, though quietly. I know you might feel anger, betrayal, confusion. Those are natural. I would feel them if I were you. I know the world may sound different now, your footsteps in familiar rooms, echoing with truths you didn't know. But do not feel obliged to carry my pain. Do not feel that my existence diminishes your father's kindness, your mother's love. They are yours. My truths do not subtract. They multiply the love that has held you. As I write this, twilight gathers outside my window, fields are dim, the oak tree's silhouette leans against an indifferent sky, and I feel both sorrow and peace. Sorrow for years lost, for moments never shared, for words never spoken, but peace because finally I step out of the shade, because finally I let you see who I was so you can decide who you are, because you deserve that part, the missing piece in your mirror. I hope one day these truths will settle in your heart gently. I hope you find grace for me, for Mary, for your father, for yourself. I hope you carry forward love, not bitterness, understanding, not blame, courage, not fear. And if you ever wonder what could have been, know that what still can be is what matters. Recognition, acceptance, connection, living your life with as much light as you choose to hold. This is my farewell of one who lived in shadows, of one who carried secrets heavier than war, of one who now lays them down at your feet. Your story is yours. My part is small, but real. I release this past into your hands, so you may walk forward into whatever future you make, unburdened by what was hidden, free in your own truth. We share true stories like this every day. Stories of love, loss, and everything in between. If this one moved you like it moved me to write it, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't let memories like this fade into silence.